Hello, welcome to Block 2, Solving Problems with Multiplication and Division. Lesson 5. I'll share my screen. So, in your previous lesson, you learned how to multiply and divide integers and decimals by powers of 10. In today's lesson, you're going to learn how to multiply by 0.1 and 0.01. In other words, you learn how to multiply numbers by tenths and hundredths. Okay? Make sure you support our mission to educate the global population of children. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, share the video to those you think could benefit, and click on the notification bell so that when new videos are released, you will be notified. Thank you. Before we start, I would like you to do retrieval practice questions by answering questions 1 and 2 in 3 minutes. Assuming you've paused the video and you've answered questions 1 and 2, here are the answers. For the first one, you were asked 180 divided by 10. Now, I'm going to start to use, you remember that method I showed you in our previous lesson, the way you think about shifting decimal places, okay, which is another way of thinking about the digits moving in the opposite direction of what you're doing to the decimal places. So we're dividing by 10. So we'll do this. So that's 1. All right, we're dividing by 10. So remember, every number has an invisible decimal point in front. So we could have written this number as 180.000, but we don't write that. So that's why it's 18. Next one is 1.8. Why? We do this, we're dividing by 10. That's 1.8. Here, we're dividing by 100. 1, 2. Okay, that should be 1.8. Here, we're dividing by 100. So that would be 1, 2. That's 0.18. Okay. Okay, now, here, we're told to work out each calculation. Now, to work out each calculation, you need to realize that we can think of fractions as divisions and divisions as fractions. So this is 5/8. Yeah. This is 7/10. This is 16/8, which is the same thing as 16 divided by 8 because we can think of fractions as divisions, which gives us an answer of 2. And this is 14 divided by 10, which is 1.4. Let's do some new learning. If we multiply 6 by 0.1, we can think of it in different ways. One of the ways we can think about this is we can say, well, we know that multiplication is commutative. So it means it doesn't matter how we swap the numbers in the calculation, we'll get the same answer. So thinking about it is a bit like having 0.1 counters up to 6 lots of them. Now, if we have 0.1, 6 lots of them will be 0.6. We could also think about it as the place value system. Now, remember, when we have ones and we now have, we have 6 ones and we now multiply by 0.1, you will notice that according to the answer we had at first, we're going to be having a change in place value, which is 6/10. Now, think about it. Where did we see this calculation before? Well, you're right. We saw it in our previous lesson when we were dividing. So 0.1 is the same thing as dividing by 10. Now, if you remember what I told you, if this is the same thing as dividing by 10, thinking about what we've learned so far, we can say, well, we can just do this. Okay, so since 0.1 is the same thing as dividing by 10, that's why this has to be 0.6, because remember there's an invisible decimal point there. We now have a decimal point there, which is 0.6, or we can write it as 0.6. So we could write 0.6, or we could just put the 0 there as 0.6. Okay. Now, another way of thinking about it is to know that 0.1 is a tenth. A tenth is 1 divided by 10. So we could write this calculation like this. And remember, from our initial retrieval practice question, this can also be written like this. It is 6 over 10, which is 6 divided by 10. We could also use a bar model to represent this to say, well, if we were to divide 6 into 10 equal parts, of course, each part will be 0.6. That's what it means. Now, we can begin to use this knowledge to answer some really interesting questions, because once we can generalize this, we can answer other questions, being able to to multiply any number by 0.1 and make progress to multiply any number by 0.01. So remember what we've learned so far. To multiply a number by 0.1 is the same thing, or is equivalent to dividing that number by 10. So to complete this statement, we can begin to fill things out. So this is 4.2 times 1 over 10, and it's the same thing as to divide by 10, which is 0.42. Remember what we discussed so far? It's a bit like doing this. You're dividing, so it's a bit like moving your decimal point that way, which is the same thing as losing place value, right? So moving the decimal point that way is a bit like moving your digits, okay? Moving your digits to the right, which means your digits are losing place value. So in that case, we're going to have 0.42 because it's moved here, and here that is our answer. All right, it's now time for you to practice what you've learned so far. Answer questions 1 and 2 in 4 minutes. So pause the video and answer the questions. Practice, practice, practice. Assuming you've paused the video and you've answered the questions, here are the answers. So celebrate your success and mark your work. All right. Question 2, I'll just comment on that. It says, explain why multiplying by 0.1 is the same as multiplying by 1/10, because 0.1 is a tenth and it's a bit like dividing by 10. So to divide by a number by 10 is the same thing as multiplying by 1/10. So 0.1 is equivalent to 1/10. Okay, let's make progress in our learning to now consider what happens when we multiply by 0.01 or 100th. I think some of you may already have figured out what is going on here. This is the same thing as multiplying by 100th or dividing by 100. Now, if you think about it in your place value chart, this is what happens. When we divide by 100, we lose 2 places in our place value chart. So the tens moves 2 places from here to here. So that's why it's in the tens column. And this loses 2 places in the place value to here. And that gives you 0. Just a minute. Let's move that. And that gives you 0.1. 0.14. Okay? Why? Another way of thinking about it, remember what we learned? It could be to say, okay, we're dividing by 100. So it's the same thing as if we're doing this. So we now have, remember we said there's always an invisible decimal point in front of a number. So this is now the same thing as this decimal point has now moved here because we divided by 100. Is the same thing as the digits. So the decimal points moving that way is the same thing as the digits moving that way to show their loss of place value because we're dividing by 100. So this becomes 0.14. We could also write it as 0.14. Okay, let's look at another example. If we have this one now, 2.3 times 0.1 times 0.1. I want you to think about this carefully. If 0.1 is the same thing as 1/10, well, this could be, we could do this like this. So we could say, well, let's do 2.3 divided by 10. 2.3 divided by 10 will be 0.3. Remember, it's going to lose place value if we use that method we've been using because I really want you to master it. Another way of thinking about this. This will now be 0.23 times 0.1, which will give us 0.03. Well, let's talk about a different way of doing this calculation that I have been showing you because I want you to master this. 2.3 times 0.1 times 0.1 is a bit like, 0.1 is a bit like saying divided by 10 and then divided by 10 again, which is to divide by 100. So that's 2.3 divided by 100. Remember, you shift your decimal point. So that's 1, 2. We put 0 as a placeholder in that bubble. Our decimal point is here. So our answer is 0.023, which is the same thing as 0.023. Okay? All right. I'm sure you've taken note of that. Let's move on. So our answer could be this, thinking about another way of doing it. So if we divide by 10 first, this is what we have. If we divide by 10 again, that is what we have. So it's the same thing as dividing by 100. So each square will be 0.03. Okay, pause the video and answer the questions that follow now for you to practice what you've learned. Pause the video and answer questions 3 and 4 in 4 minutes. All right, assuming you've paused the video and you've answered questions 3 and 4, here are the answers. So mark your work and celebrate your success. Really well done. I'll comment on the last one. It says explain why multiplying by 0.01 is the same as dividing by 100. We know that 0.01 is 1 over 100th, which is 1 over 100, 1 divided by 100. And multiplying by 1 over 100th is the same as dividing by 100. Pause the video and answer questions 5 and 6 in 2 minutes. Assuming you've paused the video and you've answered questions 5 and 6, here are the answers. So mark your work and celebrate your success. So the answer is no for question 5. We do not agree with Eva. She says multiplying by 0.1 and then multiplying by 0.1 again is the same as multiplying by 0.01. Yes, we agree. Yes. Sorry, I got, that was my mistake. It's yes. Why? Because 0.01 is same thing as 1/10, and then another 0.1 is same thing as 1/10. So it's the same thing as multiplying by 1/10 twice. And that's the answer for question 6. Mark your work and celebrate your success. Pause the video and answer questions 7 and 8 in 4 minutes. So by now, you master this, you get quicker and quicker at doing the calculations. All right, assuming you've paused the video and you've answered the questions, here are the answers. So mark your work and celebrate your success. Really well done for working hard. So take note, once you master that method where I told you that you could be shifting your decimal points, you can actually visualize them. So you can just look, oh, I'm multiplying by 0.1, divide by 10. So you just say, oh, it's going to be here, 0.20. Oh, that one. Okay. So it's going to be 4.8. So you can actually just look at them and just say the answer because you've mastered or you now know how it really works. This one, you say, oh, okay, the decimal point will be right here in front. So I'm multiplying by 0.01. So it's going to shift there. So it's going to be 30.80 or 30.8. Pause the video and answer questions 9 in 2 minutes. All right, assuming you've paused the video and you've answered question 9, here are the answers. So mark your work and celebrate your success. Well done for working hard. So here, question 9a, it says, I can think of a multiplication where the number stays the same, and that is just multiplying by 1. And then here, sometimes multiplication makes a number greater, and sometimes multiplication makes a number smaller. Of course, yes. If we're multiplying by powers of 10, such as 10, 100, we're definitely going to make the number greater. But if we're multiplying by negative powers of 10, you say, what is he talking about? Don't worry, you're going to learn about it. So, for example, the number, 0.1, which is a tenth, is a negative power of 10, but you're going to learn about it. I want you to have that at the back of your mind. So multiplying with those numbers will make numbers smaller, okay? All right, pause the video and answer question 10 in 4 minutes. You can take a shorter time to do it. All right, assuming you've paused the video and you've answered the questions, here are the answers. So mark your work and celebrate your success. Well done for working hard. All right, assuming you've paused the video and you've answered the question, assuming you've marked your work and celebrated your success, well done for working hard in this lesson. So what have we learned so far? We have learned that you can multiply by 0.1, which is a tenth. You can also multiply by 0.01, which is a hundredth. But you just need to know that by multiplying with these numbers, you're simply changing place values. And we've also learned the method of knowing how to shift our decimal points, which mimics the opposite direction of movement of the digits as the digits change place value. Until next time, really well done for working hard and for sticking around to learn. Take good care of yourself, and bye-bye.